That wise old Jedi Master you admire, he's probably been alive since before your great-great-great-grandmother was born. That seemingly young character fighting in the Clone Wars? They've actually witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. The Star Wars galaxy is filled with characters whose true ages will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about beings who've been alive for centuries, millennia, and in some cases, tens of thousands of years. These aren't just background characters either. We're talking about major players in galactic history who've been pulling strings longer than most species have existed. Today, we're revealing the shocking real ages of 10 Star Wars characters that will completely change how you see them. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Yoda the same way again. And that's just the beginning. Number 10. Chewbacca. 234 years old, the Wookiee who's seen it all. Most people think Chewbacca is just Han Solo's co-pilot, but here's something that'll shock you. Chewie is over 200 years old. That means he was already an adult when Anakin Skywalker was still a child on Tatooine. We actually see evidence of this in Revenge of the Sith, where Chewbacca is fighting alongside Yoda during the Battle of Kashyyyk. At this point, he's already around 200 years old, making him one of the most experienced warriors in the rebellion. Think about what this means. Chewbacca has witnessed the fall of the Republic, the rise of the Empire, the entire galactic civil war, and the emergence of the First Order. He's seen multiple generations of humans live and die while he's remained virtually unchanged. This also explains why Chewbacca is so fiercely loyal and protective. When you've lived for over 2 centuries, you learn to value the relationships that matter. Han Solo wasn't just his friend. He was one of the few beings Chewie met who treated him as an equal, rather than just another alien. The crazy part is that for Wookiees, 200 years old is still considered middle-aged. Chewbacca could potentially live another 200 years, meaning he might outlive everyone we know in the current Star Wars timeline. Number 9. R2-D2. Over 70 years old, the droid who remembers everything. Here's something most fans don't realize. R2-D2 is one of the few characters who's been present for literally every major event in Star Wars history. This little droid has been rolling around the galaxy for over 7 decades. R2 was already serving the Royal House of Naboo during the events of the Phantom Menace. That means he witnessed Anakin's discovery, his fall to the dark side, Luke's journey to become a Jedi, and the rise of the sequel trilogy. He's basically the galaxy's most reliable historian. But here's what makes this even more incredible. Unlike C-3PO, R2-D2 never had his memory wiped. Every traumatic event, every victory, every loss is still stored in his databanks. He remembers Anakin as a child. He remembers watching him become Darth Vader, and he remembers helping Luke destroy both Death Stars. This explains so much about R2's behavior throughout the saga. His fierce loyalty to the Skywalker family, his willingness to take incredible risks, his seemingly intuitive understanding of what needs to be done. It's all because he's been there since the beginning. The little droid has probably saved the galaxy more times than any Jedi, and he's been doing it for longer than most characters have been alive. When you think about it, R2-D2 might be the most important character in all of Star Wars. Number 8. Jabba the Hutt, 604 years old, the crime lord who built an empire. Jabba the Hutt wasn't just some random gangster who happened to control Tatooine's underworld. This massive slug had been building his criminal empire for over 600 years, making him one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. To put this in perspective, Jabba was already centuries old when the Republic was still young. He's witnessed the rise and fall of countless governments, survived multiple galactic wars, and built a criminal network that spans entire sectors of space. During the Clone Wars, we see that Jabba's influence is so vast now that both the Republic and the Separatists are desperate for his support. That kind of power doesn't happen overnight. It takes centuries of careful planning, strategic alliances, and ruthless business practices. Think about all the smugglers, bounty hunters, and criminals who've worked for Jabba over the centuries. He's probably employed thousands of beings, eliminated countless rivals, and accumulated wealth that most planetary governments could only dream of. This also makes his death in Return of the Jedi even more significant. When Leia strangled Jabba with that chain, she wasn't just killing a crime boss. She was ending a criminal dynasty that had existed for over half a millennium. The power vacuum left by his death would have reshuffled the entire galactic underworld. Number 7. Yoda, 900 years old, the ancient Jedi Master. Everyone knows Yoda is old, but let's really think about what 900 years means in the Star Wars universe. This isn't just elderly, this is ancient beyond comprehension. Yoda was already a Jedi Master when the Republic was in its infancy. He's trained literally thousands of Jedi over 9 centuries, witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations, and seen patterns in the Force that younger beings can't even comprehend. But here's what's really mind-blowing. Yoda remembers when the Sith were thought to be extinct. For 800 years, he believed the galaxy was at peace, only to discover in his final century that the Sith had been manipulating galactic events the entire time. This explains why Yoda seems so wise, but also so tired in the original trilogy. He's not just disappointed about Anakin's fall, he's carrying the weight of 900 years of mistakes, missed opportunities, and failed intuitions. The guilt of not seeing Palpatine's true nature must have been overwhelming. When Yoda says, "When 900 years old you reach, look as good you will not," he's not just making a joke about his appearance. He's acknowledging that he's lived longer than most beings can even imagine, and the burden of those centuries is finally catching up to him. The fact that he spent his final years training Luke shows just how much hope meant to him after 900 years of watching the galaxy struggle with darkness. Number 6. Emperor Palpatine, over 120 years old, the Sith Lord who played the long game. Most fans think Palpatine was just a clever politician who seized power during the Clone Wars, but his master plan actually took decades to execute. By the time of his death in Return of the Jedi, Palpatine was well over 100 years old. Palpatine was already a seasoned politician when he became Supreme Chancellor. His rise to power wasn't a quick grab. It was a carefully orchestrated plan that took decades of manipulation, bribery, and strategic elimination of rivals. But here's what makes his age even more impressive. Palpatine was using Sith alchemy and dark side techniques to extend his natural lifespan. A normal human wouldn't have been able to maintain the physical and mental energy needed to orchestrate a galactic war while also running the government. By the time of the original trilogy, Palpatine's body was literally falling apart from decades of channeling dark side energy. The Emperor we see in Return of the Jedi isn't just old. He's been artificially extending his life through the Force, and it's taking a visible toll. This also explains why he was so desperate to find a new apprentice. Vader was more machine than man, and Palpatine knew his own body couldn't sustain him much longer. He needed someone young and powerful to carry on his legacy. The fact that he managed to survive his apparent death and return in The Rise of Skywalker shows just how far he was willing to go to cheat death and maintain his power. Number 5. Mace Windu, 72 years old, the Jedi Master who lived through galactic change. Mace Windu might look like he's in his prime during the prequel trilogy, but he was actually in his 70s during the Clone Wars. That means he witnessed decades of galactic politics and Jedi history that younger council members missed. Windu was already a seasoned Jedi Master when Qui-Gon Jinn was still a Padawan. He'd seen the Republic's gradual decline over decades, watched corruption spread through the Senate, and witnessed the Jedi Order's slow transformation from peacekeepers to soldiers. This experience is why Mace Windu was so suspicious of Anakin from the beginning. It wasn't just about the prophecy or Anakin's age. Windu had seen enough in his 7 decades to recognize dangerous patterns when they emerged. Windu's age also explains his unique fighting style and force abilities. Veipad, his lightsaber form, required decades of training and discipline to master. His ability to channel dark side energy without being corrupted came from 70 years of understanding both light and dark aspects of the Force. When Windu confronted Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, it wasn't just a Jedi Master facing a Sith Lord. It was a 72-year-old warrior using 7 decades of experience and training to battle the most dangerous Sith in galactic history. His defeat wasn't just tragic because of what it meant for the Republic. It was the loss of nearly 3/4 of a century of Jedi wisdom and experience. Number 4. Obi-Wan Kenobi, 57 years old in A New Hope, the hermit who wasn't that old. Here's something that might surprise you. Obi-Wan Kenobi was only 57 years old when Luke first met him on Tatooine. That means all that aging and weathering happened in just 19 years of desert exile. Think about this. Obi-Wan was 38 when he defeated Anakin on Mustafar. By the time he's training Luke, he looks like he's aged about 30 years, but only 19 have actually passed. That's what guilt, isolation, and the harsh Tatooine climate will do to you. This relatively young age makes Obi-Wan's wisdom even more impressive. He wasn't some ancient sage who'd lived for centuries. He was a middle-aged man carrying the weight of the galaxy's fall on his shoulders. It also explains why Obi-Wan was still capable of lightsaber combat when he faced Darth Vader on the Death Star. At 57, he should have been in his prime as a warrior, but years of exile and emotional trauma had taken their toll. The tragic part is that Obi-Wan spent nearly a third of his life in exile, waiting for the right moment to train the son of his former apprentice. Those 19 years on Tatooine weren't just about hiding, they were about preparing for one final chance to save the galaxy. When you realize how relatively young he was, his sacrifice becomes even more poignant. This wasn't an old man at the end of his natural life. This was someone who still had decades ahead of him, choosing to give it all up for the greater good. Number 3. Ahsoka Tano, over 70 years old, in current timeline, the Padawan who lived through everything. Ahsoka Tano was just 14 years old when she became Anakin's Padawan. But by the time of her own series, she's lived through more galactic history than most beings could imagine. Let's do the math. Ahsoka was born 36 years before the Battle of Yavin, making her 14 during the Clone Wars, 19 when the Empire rose to power, and around 45 during the events of Rebels. By the time of The Mandalorian and her own series, she's well into her 70s. This means Ahsoka has personally witnessed the fall of the Republic, the rise of the Empire, the Galactic Civil War, and the emergence of the New Republic. She's one of the few beings alive who knew Anakin Skywalker before he became Darth Vader. Her age also explains why she's become so wise and measured in her approach to the Force. She's had decades to reflect on her experiences, to understand the failures of the Jedi Order, and to develop her own philosophy about balance and responsibility. But here's what's really incredible. Ahsoka is still relatively young for her species. Togrutas can live well over 100 years, meaning she potentially has decades more to influence galactic events. She's already survived longer than most Jedi in history, and she's not done yet. The fact that she's maintained her moral compass and fighting spirit through all these decades of conflict shows just how strong her character really is. Number 2. Grogu, 50 years old, the child who's older than most adults. Everyone calls him the child, but here's the shocking truth. Grogu is actually 50 years old. That makes him older than Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, and most of the characters we consider adults in the Star Wars saga. Grogu was already alive during the Clone Wars and survived Order 66 as a youngling at the Jedi Temple. This means he has first-hand memories of the Republic's fall and the Jedi Purge, even if he can't fully process or communicate them yet. His species ages incredibly slowly, which explains why he still has the mentality and behavior of a toddler, despite being 5 decades old. But those 50 years of experience are still locked away in his mind, waiting to emerge as he develops. This also explains Grogu's incredible Force sensitivity. He's had 50 years to absorb Force energy and develop his abilities, even if he doesn't fully understand how to control them yet. His raw power level makes sense when you realize he's been connected to the Force for half a century. The tragedy of Grogu's story is that he's spent most of his life in hiding or captivity. Those 50 years should have been spent training and learning, but instead, he's been struggling to survive in a galaxy that hunts his kind. Now that he's with Luke Skywalker, Grogu finally has the chance to unlock 5 decades worth of accumulated Force potential. He might be small and cute, but he's got more life experience than most characters in the galaxy. Number 1. The Bendu, thousands of years old, the ancient Force entity. The Bendu from Star Wars Rebels isn't just old. This massive Force entity has existed for thousands upon thousands of years, making him older than recorded galactic history. The Bendu describes himself as the one in the middle, neither light nor dark, but the balance between them. He's witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, seen the Jedi and Sith orders emerge and evolve, and observed galactic conflicts that have been forgotten by history. What makes the Bendu's age so mind-blowing is that he remembers when the Force was understood differently. Before the Jedi and Sith created their rigid interpretations of light and dark, beings like the Bendu represented a more ancient, balanced approach to Force sensitivity. His enormous size isn't just for show, it represents millennia of growth and Force absorption. The Bendu has literally become one with his environment on Atollon, existing as both creature and landscape after thousands of years of meditation and Force communion. When the Bendu finally loses his temper and attacks both Imperial and Rebel forces, we're seeing the rage of a being who's watched the galaxy tear itself apart for millennia. His disappointment isn't just with current events, it's with thousands of years of repetitive conflict and suffering. The fact that he chooses to abandon Atollon rather than take sides shows just how exhausted he is after eons of watching history repeat itself. Now that you know which characters are older than you thought, wait until you see how some of them, or their enemies, met their end. Trust me, these are lightsaber kills you won't forget. Click on the video on your screen now.